For this session, we're going to talk about background images. We're going to try to put a background image on the entire page, which will be on the body tag. We'll also put a background image or images on some individual divs. All of this will be done with CSS. So to start out, I've got a basic HTML skeleton here. I actually don't have any divs. All I have at this point, I've got my basic doc type, HTML, the head tag with a title, a link to a style sheet that I haven't made yet. It's blank, I don't have anything in that yet. And then in the body, I've got 3 paragraphs. Okay, so no CSS, no references to CSS with the exception of this link tag, and just 3 basic paragraph tags. The first thing I want to do is start looking at applying background images and background colors to the body tag. Now to do that, I'm going to go ahead and make a new document. This is going to be my CSS. So let me blow those fonts up a little bigger so you can see them. And I'm simply going to put the word body here. Now we've dealt all semester with CSS properties, or CSS selectors, that starts with a dot. And a dot typically means that this is a class. It's something that's going to be reused over and over again. There's also another type of selector called an ID, which starts with a pound. An ID is something that's going to be used once per page, and only once per page. It might be a good idea to maybe create a container as an ID instead of a class, or something you're only going to have one up per page. If you're only going to have one header per page, that could be a pound header instead of a dot header. In this particular course, there's not really a huge benefit of using IDs. Over the long term, you can really do some interactive things with them, like animate divs and make mobile apps and so on. And IDs come in real handy because then you refer to that in JavaScript. But for basic web design, it's not really necessary that you use IDs over classes for anything yet. So all semester long, we've used classes, which is fine. We haven't really seen a good use of a tag. So there's class, ID, and tag. A tag correlates with an existing HTML tag. A class and an ID I can make up, but an HTML tag, a tag for CSS, you can't. It has to be a body or a div or a paragraph or some other tag that you've used. Now what happens when you specify a tag here in CSS, every time you use this tag, the CSS properties and values you're getting ready to add will affect it every time. So this isn't something you use a lot of. You might use it for a body tag to do like the background color or a background image. Maybe you put like a default font on here, so if you want every font on every page to be Arial, for example, you could do that here. You also do it sometimes on the anchor tag, so you can format your links so they're not blue and underlined like a standard link is. So for right now, we're just really concerned about getting some backgrounds on here. So I'm going to start by adding a background color. And we've already seen this property and value on a div before. We've done this in a previous session. So this isn't real new to us. I'll say background color pound 369. I'll save this as style.css inside of my root folder. I've already established a root folder for this project prior to starting the video. And now I can go out and take a quick look at that HTML. Now this HTML, I've saved this background image.html. Let me make sure that I've got everything squared away here. So I can save this file, look at this in a browser, and there it is. There are my 3 paragraphs, and there obviously is a background color. And no matter how large or small my browser gets, the background extends forever. This website will be blue from top to bottom, left to right, until I put another background on it, or maybe a background on a div. So for right now, I've got a background on here. Now we can also put a background image on. We also looked at this, I believe, last week. A background image might look something like this. And this is assuming that there's a file called bgimage.jpg in my root folder. If it's in an images folder, then I would need something like images/ before it. But since I'm setting this up from scratch here, I'm just going to drop this right in my root folder. So if I go out here to my folders, let's see, I'm going to go into my demo folder. Actually, I'll go to my demo2 folder. I've got some images that I've already got here. So here's one that I sliced from the last session. I'm going to put that right here in my demo folder, and I'm going to rename it so that it is bgimage.jpg. Now, assuming that I spelled that right and I've got my code just right, I should be able to refresh my website here. And sure enough, there is my background image. The background image is this black graphic that says my website on it. It was the first slice in our Photoshop design. And by default, it really, it tiles itself. It repeats itself, which we refer to as tiling, side to side and top to bottom. So it tiles itself forever. No matter how large or small my monitor or my browser windows are, this thing is going to repeat itself. And that might be well and good for some designs, but this particular image is really a horrible image for that. Good background images are ones that have low contrast, are subtle, and repeat well. You can go out to Google and you can search for background images and you'll find lots of free ones. Of course, you can also make your own. But background images generally need to be subtle and maybe a small texture or something like that. If the coolest thing on your website is your background image, you've done something wrong. All right, background images are meant to be just that, in the background. They're not meant to be a big part of the design, just a small detail. So something like this is really a horrible background image. I can't read any of the text that's on here. I can only see a little bit of it when I see on top of the white, which isn't much. So I want a real low contrasted image. Now, just for kicks, I do want to go back to the code and take a look at another CSS property we can add on here. We can change the way that these repeat by simply adding in a new property called background-repeat. And we've got three choices here. We can choose to not repeat this at all, no-repeat, would make it so that my background doesn't repeat at all. It's still a background image. I can still see the text on top of it there, but it's not repeating. I can also put repeat X or repeat Y. Repeat X, if you remember from math, the X-axis being the one that goes side to side. Repeat X will only allow this to repeat side to side and not top to bottom, so it only tiles itself one way. Similarly, we can change that to repeat Y, and we'll refresh that, and sure enough, there it is. It only repeats on the Y-axis, the vertical axis. Still a background. I can still see my text on top of it, but obviously not very well, but it does repeat on one axis. So that's pretty handy. That's going to come in real handy for us here in a little bit. So let's say for the background here, we'll go ahead and leave it repeating. I'm just going to take that background repeat out for right now because I do want it to repeat for a while. Now back in my HTML, I'm actually going to go ahead and drop in a div tag. And just for an example, I'll go ahead and make this an ID equals container. I mentioned earlier that we can make this an ID or a class. If you do want this to be an ID, it has to say ID here instead. Remember, the only difference is you can only use an ID once per page. So this could be the only container I've got on the whole page, which it is anyways. That means for an ID, I'll say pound container, margin of auto, we'll do overflow hidden, background color, 333, and we'll do a width of 955 px. If you save that, and assuming you've also saved your HTML, I'll make sure I've saved both of those, I should be able to run back to my browser, refresh it, and there it goes. So 333 was what I put my background color on. A little dark. So I'm going to go change that to something higher. Maybe I'll even put it all the way up to FFF, which should be white. There we go. Now we can see that a little better. So now we've got a container in the middle of the screen. We've got a background on our body tag, which tiles itself forever. So this just shows you a glimpse into how powerful backgrounds can be. You can have a background in every div. If you have a div inside of a div, inside of a div, inside of a div, then obviously you can put a background in every one of those and really create a nice layered look on your website. So we don't get layers like Photoshop, but we certainly do have divs inside of divs inside of divs with a background on each one that sure makes it look that way.